Hey everybody, welcome to the Foundation's Conversation at Home program. I'm Jim Halterman, West Coast Bureau Chief of TV Guide Magazine. Before we get started, the Foundation has set up a COVID relief fund in order to support thousands of union performers who are going through tough times. Since March 2020, thanks for your donations, the Foundation has given nearly $7 million in emergency aid to more than 7,000 performers and their families. If you are a SAG-AFTRA member and need help, please ask. And if you can help, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. Thanks for your support. Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Dylan McDermott, currently starring on NBC's Law & Order Organized Crime. Dylan, thanks for chatting with me today.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You bet, you bet. We're going to dive into organized crime in just a second because there's so much to cover there. But I happened to watch Steel Magnolias this weekend because Olympia Dukakis had passed. So kind of in her memory, I was watching some of her movies, and there was a young Dylan McDermott right there in the mix. Talk to me. Talk to me about that time in your career, though. One, you're working on all these legends, but also you had a couple things on your resume, but it was still early in your career. What was your kind of trajectory and what were your hopes for your career at that time?
Yes, I remember my first film was Hamburger Hill. Mm-hmm. And I got some attention from that movie. And then they were searching for Jackson, I remember. And there were, I was on a list and I met with the casting director, but it was one of those coveted roles because of all the stars that were in it. And certainly the only movie I really had done was Hamburger Hill, where, we had one costume and we didn't have a dressing room and we were all full of mud and they would hose us down, with water to clean us so we can go on to the next scene. And then there I was on Steel Magnolias, which was, what is, I never saw so much food in my life. I mean, there was breakfast, there was lunch, there was dinner, there was catering. There was just people had trailers, hair and makeup. It was just, it actually blew my mind because I thought, wow, this is my first, entrance into Hollywood and the Hollywood star and the Hollywood star system. And so I was like, oh, I could get used to this.
What were you thinking as far as your career? Did you have like big plans, what you wanted to do, or were you just kind of going job to job at that point?
I mean, luckily, I did have a plan. Your career is shaped by saying no, not yes. I had been offered a bunch of things and I turned them down because I did have a plan for myself. I think you do have to have a plan. You do have to have some kind of sense of self in order to certainly succeed in this business and what you want, and be very clear about that, and have the ability to say no, and have the guts to say no, because it's hard. Everybody wants to be an actor. Everybody wants to make money. Everybody wants, all the stuff that comes with it. But, at the end of the day, it really is about the work. I've always believed it's always been about the work for me. I never did a job for money. I've always done it because I was interested in the role or interested in the people in the movie. So that was tried and true for me, certainly. And around that time, I was making a decision. And luckily, the New York Times had wrote a nice article about me, a searing debut, they called it, for Hamburger Hill. So, I wanted to stay on that path. And I thought a movie like Steel Magnolias, which would get a lot of eyeballs, and I thought it would be good for me. And it was. And there's so many legends in that movie. And watching Sally Field work, being on the set, with Sam Shepard, I learned a lot on that movie. There was an elegance about it. It was Hollywood. You know what I mean? Suddenly this was Hollywood. This was the Hollywood I saw, when I was growing up and watching movies. So it really was a great lesson.
I remember last time we talked a few years ago was for LA to Vegas, which at that time people were like, oh, you're doing a comedy. But I found out during our chat that comedy was a big part of your early days and It wasn't that foreign to you. But you obviously are known for these dramatic roles like the one you're playing now. Mm-hmm. Was there ever a push-pull for yourself that you wanted to lean more into one or the other, or did you not really think about it?
I love comedy the most. I don't get to do enough of it. LA to Vegas was a dream come true for me, because people never expected me in a million years to be able to pull that off. And I love that. That's what's great about this business is that you can change people's minds in an instant. And, people do make up their minds about you pretty quickly in Hollywood, and they put you in a box, and then it's your job to get out of that box somehow and change people's minds. And I've done that pretty regularly throughout my career, certainly most recently in Hollywood. I don't think people ever thought me, I could do that role or pull it off, or, ever even thought of me for that role. I mean, that was the genius of Ryan Murphy. So there are certain points along your career where you do have to change. I can't just be this guy, because it's boring and people will get sick of me and be like, oh, it's enough of this. So you do have to change, and you have to change, every few years in order to kind of stay relevant as an actor, because there's so many great actors and there's so many new people coming up. And my job is always to be like, whoa, I didn't know he could do that, or that was Dylan, or, something like that. You want to have, and also for me. So I know that I can do that, not just for everybody else, but for me.
And then when you're younger in your career and you want to say no to things and you want to see things steer in a different way, or even speak up and just say, I don't want to do that. How do you find that voice? Because we have so many actors who are watching these interviews, and especially when you're just trying to keep your job and do a good job, but then, things get complicated and things change and all that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sure. I mean, I think, let me say this. You can never make a bad script good. And when you're a young actor, you think you can. Think, oh, you know what? I can really do something with this. I can fix it. I can make it better. You can't. If Marlon Brando couldn't do it, nobody could. So, really it's about the material. You have to go where the material is. You want to be surrounded by a great director, great material, and great actors. That's what you want. You want to stay in that wheelhouse. Once you move off that and you sort of start to take jobs that are maybe less than you, or you want to pay the bills or whatever it is, your brand starts to get diminished and people think less of you. I mean, that's the reality. As hard as that is to hear, you really have to stay, true to the craft. And you have to make sure that you're always on par with who you think you are. There's a great line in Perks of Being a Wallflower that I always kind of live by, which is, you accept the love you think you deserve. Right?
Yeah.
You accept the job you think you deserve. You accept the relationship you think you deserve. All that stuff is true. And one of the hardest things in the world, obviously, for everybody to have is self-esteem, to have worth, right? What is my worth? Yeah. Know your worth. The people that I have worked with who have been some of the biggest stars, they always had one thing in common. They believed that they should be there. That they had a sense of worth that, that's why they're movie stars.
Yeah.
And it's not always the people who are the talented or the smartest and the most beautiful. It's the people who have worth and know it. So once you have that kind of worth, or however you get to it, maybe you have to go to therapy, maybe you have to work on yourself. I don't know. I don't care how you get there, because that worth is going to take you to the next level. So you can get the good parts. That's what it's about.
And how did you come to learn that? Was it just from watching other people, or did somebody actually sit you down and say those same words to you, or is it just experience in a lot of ways?
I think a little sprinkle of being delusional, it helps a little bit. You have to kind of fake it till you make it. And luckily, I always believe that there's one person that comes into your life that changes your life. And sometimes we miss it. We don't accept it, right? Yeah. For me, that person was Eve Ensler. She wrote the Vagina Monologues, and she became my mother when I think she adopted me when I was 19. But anyway, she became that person who believed in me. And her belief in me gave me the fuel to be able to go out into the world and do what I had to do. And I do believe that there's always that one person in your life who believes in you, and if you don't have one, find one, because ultimately you want to be that person.
Sure.
Eventually I was able to take what she gave me and integrate it into myself and be able to believe in myself. Because I'll tell you this, when I'm on a set, I know exactly who I am. I know my worth as an actor. If you ask me about that in life, I would say, not so much.
Yeah.
But as an actor, I know my worth. It's funny. I look at it sometimes because I'm like, wow, I have such self-esteem as an actor. But in life, it's just not as much.
Yeah.
So I know who I am as an actor, and that really has taken me somewhere.
Yeah, it served you very well. And so jumping many years ahead, now we're at Law and Order Organized Crime. A couple. But when I first heard about the show and heard that you were going to play I'll say villain, I guess that's a good word for him. But I already started creating kind of what I thought it would probably be, knowing the Law and Order universe and knowing those shows. But then I was so pleasantly surprised when I saw who this character was, because I thought, wow, there's such layers here, and he's not what I was expecting. Was it is he what you were expecting when you first read that first script or had the first conversations with the producers?
Sometimes when you're building a character, you have a vision of him. And then for me, I daydream a lot. I was telling my daughter yesterday, she was in Hollywood with me, and I was saying, she was talking about being up for a role. And I said, well, go daydream. Just daydream about the role. And I do that all the time. I did it we're in the 7th episode of Organized Crime. And I was daydreaming about certain moments in it. I just let myself drift and go, and my imagination took over. So, and all these little nuggets came to me, and I was like, oh yeah, I want to do this, and I want to add that. What about this? My imagination is working. So I had it all planned out before I arrived on set. I knew exactly, what trench coat he wore. I knew the designer of the trench coat. I knew exactly who he was. So by the time I arrived, I was ready to go. So yes, and sometimes that doesn't happen, by the way. Your vision doesn't always kind of translate to the screen.
Yeah.
But for, this happened for Law and Order Organized Crime. Whatever I thought he was going to be, he's there. And that's a beautiful thing when it happens, because it's like, that's why we act. That's why we keep doing it. Because it's like, it just feels, for me, I did a scene the other day with Chris Maloney, and I was just like, I came home and I was riding home, and I was just like, yes, this is why I act. Because I literally get high from it.
That's so cool. That's great. So you threw my train of thought, because I was thinking like, wow, I want to go daydream now and like think of things. But I do.
It's the best thing in the world, I think.
Yeah. And I do meditate, and sometimes your mind takes you places. It's not just about quieting things. All of a sudden you're thinking. It's like, that's not a bad thing, because it does open things up. I think it's great. So when I watched that first episode, I didn't see like a mustache twirling. You weren't coming on strong as what a villain you think of. This guy was very calm and cool. He looked great. He had everything, But talk about those choices, because I'm guessing a lot of that's in you. A lot of that might be in the script, that you weren't like doing the twirly mustache, like really playing a villain. You were playing a character.
Well, yeah, you always have to look for the real people. And anytime I play someone, I always look for either I interview people, I find the real person or someone like them, or I'll watch a documentary, or I do a lot of research in terms of when I take on a role. Luckily or unluckily, I don't know what you want to call it. My mother's boyfriend was a bank robber when I was growing up. So I was around gangsters when I was a kid. And also growing up in the village with my dad, I was around more gangsters as well, because they would come into the bar. I would wait on them. I would bartend on them. I went down after Joey Gallo got killed on Mulberry Street in 1972, I believe it was. I went down there with my dad. So these guys were always around. I would have to keep the bar open for them if they came in late at night.
Yeah.
So, those people I watched, I observed, they were in my body because I was around them. I knew them. I was just, they were just part of my world.
Yeah.
I didn't have to reach too far and come up with some person or some, like, if I watched The Godfather and say, oh, I'm just going to base it on The Godfather. But because and this is what I always say about acting, if you understand it, you can act it. If you don't understand it, you can't act it. So if something is so far away from you, I wouldn't take the role if I didn't understand it, because it's never going to be in my body.
Yeah.
So it's very important for me to have an understanding of stuff before I take on a role.
Okay. And we're filled in, I think it's the first episode, we see a lot of his psychology, because you see him with his father, which of course always tells a viewer so much when you see family members, and you can see he and his father are not close. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And then I won't spoil for people who haven't watched maybe, but there's some pretty tragic things happen. But talk about family to him, because his own family that he's built, you can see like that's number one for him, but then yet his father is not really a part of that. Can you talk about that a little bit as far as the character?
Well, again, I always go to the psychology. I'm fascinated by psychology. I always have been. So when I take on a role again, I think about, well, what makes a person a person? How does a person arrive at being a sociopath? Mm-hmm. Psychopaths are born, but sociopaths are made. So I had to go back into my history with my father, and he shamed me. I was overweight as a child, and he shamed me because of my weight and called me all sorts of names.
Yeah.
And that shaming scarred Richard in a way where he turned that into resentment, and that resentment soon became an injury, and that injury became a scar, and that scar led to not having empathy, and that turned him into a sociopath. And it was all around his father, and his father was a mafia boss.
Yeah.
So he had a lot of power, over a lot of people, including Richard. And I think when I had my kids and my father was a racist, I think it all just added up, it just built and built and built. And there came a point where Richard wasn't going to take it anymore, and he had to be empowered. And that's how he got it. I won't tell you what happened, like you said, but that's how he got his power.
It also makes him really relatable, because I think we can all think of things from our childhood or when we were younger, things that are still with us, no matter what we do, no matter how old we are. So to me, that was very relatable. Yeah.
Yeah. And, again, when you're playing, especially when you're playing a bad guy, it's so easy to play the bad. So I always look for, what's good in a bad man. And what's good in Richard is that he's a great father, and he's a great family man. He loves his family more and died for his family. So, having that in my back pocket, makes it complicated, makes it compelling, because like you said, he's not just a bad guy. You're like, wait a minute, how come I feel something for this guy and his family? I shouldn't. He's the bad guy. On my Twitter, I see it all the time. It's like, why am I feeling? I know I'm doing my job because, in real life, it's complicated. In movies and television, it's not so complicated. It's black and white, but nothing in life is black and white. It's always gray. It's always complex. That's the stuff that I look for when I play a character. How do I keep it complex?
Yeah. Tell me, you were talking a lot about just creating the character, but do you have to like your character? Do you have to actually like him? And do you think about the audience, whether they like them? But tell me what your perception is first. Do you have to like the person you're playing?
You do, yeah. Otherwise, you'll start to judge. And the worst thing you can do as an actor is to judge your character. That's the death of an actor, is when you start to judge. Well, maybe, that's a little mean. I don't want to do that because that's kind of mean, and maybe the audience won't like me. No, you can't do that. If he does something, you do it with conviction. You do it because you mean it, and there's a reason for it. There's a justification for everything that people do. You know, there's a couple million people in prison, and you could ask all of them. There's probably some kind of justification for what they did.
Yeah.
So, you know, never judge your character. You have to actually love your character.
And I think you answered that. So you don't really also worry if the viewer is going to like you or not. You don't get that in your head.
Because, you know, again, it takes a long time to learn this. But I certainly don't act for you. I don't act for the audience. I act for me because I love the craft of acting. When I start to think about you and whether you like me, I'm dead. Because if I'm thinking about you, if you're liking me or not, then there's a whole bunch of other people who don't like me. You know, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
So I have to like me and say, okay, I think this is good. I never walk away from the scene until I'm done with it. You know, if the director says, okay, we got it, and I think we didn't get it, I still want to do it because I'm doing it for me, for my sense of truth. So it's very important that you act for you and not for anybody else.
Okay, and now you're joining a show. It's a new show, but yet there's a lot of history with Chris's character, and people know the Law and Order universe. How has it been just to work with him? I'm guessing he's got the world on his shoulders in a lot of ways, just because this is all built around him. But you guys have some great scenes where I feel like I'm reading maybe more into, but I feel like you guys are having fun, even though you're really butting heads. But talk about working with him and a lot of these combative scenes, because it's really him against you in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah. This you know, it's all been leading up to the final episode. But no, Chris is great. And we speak the same language because we went to the same acting school together.
Oh, nice.
The neighborhood playhouse and studied with Stanford Meisner, and he also went there. So we really speak the same language in terms of our acting technique. So that's a relief because you don't always get that. So that's been great. And, you know, we're kind of at this point, we're two old seasoned pros. So we know how to do it. We know how to get it. You know, like I said, we did the scene the other night, and that was so good because it was finally just me and him. There was nobody else. You know, just we sat down and we had a scene together. And it was like, yes, this is what it's all about. Just going, you know, head to head. So I think that, you know, there's some great stuff coming up too. I mean, it's just like, wow, the end of this show is just going to be thrilling.
I can't wait. Okay, because I'm enjoying it as a viewer, not just as a TV person. I think I read somewhere that you actually get a chance to ad-lib, which to me, this seems like such a, you know, it's a serious show and all that, but ad-libbing isn't always for fun. It's to really open things up. But talk about that a little bit, and when you know you can do it and when you know you really shouldn't.
Yeah, you know, I started doing, well, certainly I've always wanted to do more of it. People have always been afraid of it. You know, most producers want the actor to stick to the script. I get it. I do it. I usually do what's written, and then I'll do a take for myself. So I usually, when I'm daydreaming, I'll think about, well, what would I do here? What would I say here? What would be different from what the script is? So then I write all that stuff down. And then when it comes for me to get my take, I put it in. And a lot of times, like in Hollywood, a lot of that stuff was in there.
Yeah.
Different lines that I would come up with. And I was like, oh, this is the bridge that I've been looking for. Because a lot of times, you know, most actors are just happy to say the lines. They're like, shoot, I said all the lines. You know what I mean? I got through it. Woo. Okay, good. But then, you know, as you go on, you realize it's not really about just getting those lines out. It's about living. You know, when you can live a character, that's what I've been doing recently. I've been embedded in these characters, so much so that, you know, they've taken over. Like I always have to like take a break. Like for this show, I have to take a break because I could feel him, starting to take over my life. And I got to be careful because it's, it gets dangerous sometimes. You're like, oh, because I'm in him so much of the time and I'm in his thought process. But anyway, getting back to the ad-libbing, I felt like that was the bridge I needed. And my work has definitely changed from that moment that I was like, you know what? I'm just going to say what I think I should say. And that started to happen. And I started to live in these guys more than I ever had before. And my work changed and people took notice of it. And I was like, oh, okay, this is the way I'm working from now on. And it's made a huge difference.
Yeah. Do you like to watch your work? Do you go back later and watch anything that you're in?
I don't, I wish I enjoyed it more, but really the joy I get is in the doing. It's the day I'm on the set. It's the day I'm in the scene.
Yeah.
It's the doing that turns me on. I'll watch it. I'll watch it once. I'll watch it rarely twice, but it's the doing. It's just like, I love doing it. That's where I get my thrill. So for me, it's more about the doing than the seeing.
And do you have, I always call it a bucket list, but when I looked at your credits earlier, you've done a little of everything, really, because you've done horror with American Horror Story and comedy and drama. Is there anything that you kind of have your eye on that you would like to do that you haven't done yet?
Yeah, I think I love character acting. I mean, I think that's, now that I'm older, I can play characters that I couldn't play before. And I think in the character, to build a character, like I did a movie called The Clove Hitch Killer, where I played a serial killer, and Wonderland, or Hollywood, or Organized Crime, or American Horror Story, what I did last season. Playing all these different type of characters, I love. It's sort of like disappearing into a guy. Mm-hmm. That really is the most fun, and that's what you want to have as an actor is range, right? Most actors don't have range. They play maybe that one guy. But when you have range, and that's what you should really study, of all the people who are listening out there, really study the character work, because that's going to be your fuel. That's going to get you to different places that you never thought you could ever get to as an actor. And that's the harder thing to do. But man, the reward behind that, you'll be so fulfilled.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, after The Practice ended, that was such a big show for you and it ran for so many years. Were people just wanting to cast you as lawyers and good guys at that point, and you had to kind of step away from that a little bit?
So getting back to your original question, about having this vision of yourself.
Yeah. When
I was doing The Practice, it was a phenomenal show and it was a big hit. But at the same time, I knew, there's this adage that I live by, which is, when you're a successful actor, the good news is people get to know you. And the bad news is people get to know you. So I could feel it. When I was doing the show that, because there were so many people watching and it was so successful and people knew me as that character, that I was like, oh man, I could feel like I was a little bit in trouble because I was that guy. And I knew that I had to escape that. And that's what you have to do as an actor. You always have to, as I said, you always have to escape the last role you did, because that's what people want to cast you as.
Yeah.
So I knew when I was making it that I had to make a change. I had to make a shift. And I worked my ass off to do that because I saw it. I saw the road ahead. I knew it. I smelt it. I tasted it. And I was right. And I was like, okay, what do I do? What do I do? And that's when American Horror Story came along.
Yeah. Amazing.
That was the change.
So you've had a very busy many decades of work, which has been fun to watch from where I sit. What was your plan B if things hadn't gone that way? Like, you'd gotten those first roles, but they didn't continue, because sometimes it doesn't, just because the business, it's a fickle business. But did you have a plan B just in case?
Well, this would probably be the most important thing I say. never, ever, ever have a plan B. Because if you have a plan B, you will use it. My dream for myself was to be a successful actor. I had no backup plan, and I didn't want one. I remember I was working, my father had a little bar in Greenwich Village, and I was working as a bartender. And I said, and I was making good money. And I said, I'm quitting. He goes, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to be an actor. He said, well, you don't have a job. I said, I know, but I'm going to get one. If I stay here and I continue to do this, I won't leave. So I'm leaving. And I don't know how or where or who or anything. But I know if I leave, I'll be forced to get a job as an actor. And that's exactly what I did. So having that vision, going back to your question, having that vision for yourself is the most important thing. You know, never mind being an actor as a person. What is your vision of yourself? How do you see yourself? Where are you going? You know, what's the dream for yourself? And never, never let go of that dream, no matter what.
Yeah. Wow. Well, all that served you very well. Thank you so much for the chat today, Dylan. That's wonderful. And you guys, Law & Order Organized Crime airs every Thursday on NBC, and I can't wait to see what happens next just as a viewer. It's been really fun to watch so far. Congratulations.
Nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you too. Thanks so much.